All right, so today's mini training, Build with Intention, a personal system for product-minded engineering. Now, before we continue, I want to emphasize that this system may or may not work for you, but it's important for you to be aware that there are systems like this, and maybe there are small pieces that you can implement into your life. As an engineer, I think that it's a really good habit for us to analyze what works, where we are right now, how can we improve. And for me, this system has been, I want to say 10 or so years of me fine-tuning and improving and finding what actually seems to work best for me. And I know it's worked for Matt, and I'm sure other people, I think both Matts actually use quite a bit of this system. But for me, I love the way that it works. I love being very meticulous in the discovery, and we'll get through that, get into this shortly. But just want to emphasize, this is not going to be the most perfect system for everyone. I want you to just keep that in mind and evaluate, try to find what works best and try to improve that as you go. It's the small steps. So what is a product-minded engineer? The way I've always defined product-mindedness is being willing to understand something before you put a lot of time and energy into it, like coding, for example. And so the way I like to translate this to is just being more involved in the processes that we have. Trying to understand what is being built before you just, hey, I'm going to spend the next 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks trying to build this. Try to understand it. And I feel like a system can help with this because, this is sort of the prerequisite that I like to think of is understanding, okay, like what are we actually building here? Do we really want to spend 20 hours, maybe 30 hours building this thing if, we don't really understand the outcome here? It's like, will this really help, when it comes to the user experience? It's being less of a, let's just say like a ticket taker and more of somebody who's trying to understand with intent, trying to improve something, an existing experience. And that I think is key, is you're trying to not just, do the mundane, like robotic, whatever, you're just doing what you do. You're trying to actually understand. It's like, hey, I want to have a voice here. That's what I think is key. So just keep that in mind as we continue. So my system for kicking off any project, and before I write a single line of code, I create the full map. I find this to be extremely effective. So the core steps, I like to have these named as rename, scaffold, data, build, and cleanup. And these can change, on a per project basis. Now, so to go through each one of these, the first step, to create a master ticket, I find to be very, very valuable. Typically, there'll be one epic, a ticket that product is managing, and then there'll be several what I call the master tickets, maybe for backend, maybe for front end, maybe for design. And it's just sort of nice to be able to control this. For every squad that I've worked, and I've been very adamant that I need to be able to manage more or less the front end tickets, or have somebody who's willing to be meticulous here, because I find that doing this before you actually code saves so much time. It really does. And this, as I mentioned, all sub tickets as well. You don't have to overthink here and provide every little detail. In my mind, it's more you're just understanding, okay, what does this section look like? Oh, we need a carousel here. It's like, oh, maybe so mobile, maybe it's only showing 2 slides versus 3. It's just stuff like that, where you just have that. So you're sort of aware of what will be built, and it helps you start out. You feel like you're a bit more prepared, and it saves so much time long term. And then the second step, rename the existing project. So if we were to redesign guide old, done. That's it. Scaffold the new project. In this case, it's pretty much just defining each of the individual components, and each of these components will just have like one text. So front end, we may just have like guide hero, and it's just returning, a div with guide hero text. That's it. You'll find that doing something like this actually reduces merge conflicts. It simplifies things so much, because somebody could come in and they could be like, all right, I'm just going to work on guide hero, and that's it. Then they focus on that, write tests when they're done, and then they could move on to the next ticket. So steps 4 to 6, plan the data work early. I find this to be one of the most important steps. So after scaffolding, I want to define which queries we need. And we don't have to worry about mutations at this point, but I like to create tickets for those. But the queries, I usually like to create those before we actually start as like a squad working on individual pieces, because this will prevent overfetching. There's so many things where people are like, well, for my ticket I need this, and this other person's like, well, that I need this, and you end up having like 20 queries that you don't actually need. And I do all of the steps 1 through 4 within one day. I can get all that done. And then break the work into clear pieces. So I find that going through this in a very incremental way helps. And then just adding a cleanup ticket later on. So just want to do a quick live demo, not actual code, more looking at a process to which I've just described. So assuming that Mike wants us to redesign guides, and he's adamant that users want to see Pokemon when they think of guides. So he's given us a design, it very much shows that this is a Pokemon, redesign here. So we've got, instead of, and just assume that brunch is guide, just think of that as you're going through this. So it's a complete redesign. I mean, everything is different. We have a top nav. We've got a lot of, there's some similarities there, of course. For an actual event, we now have, looks like it's a gym, and stuff like that. So I took this design and I'm going through each of these steps. We have the master ticket, we've got the renaming, we've got we're going through each of these different processes, and then of course the scaffolding. So here's what we're doing. We got the rename. I actually like to translate these into tickets, and all this ticket is doing is renaming guide to guide old. Done. I can get that done, and I'm going to feel like I've succeeded in every possible way, and I can get that done in 20 minutes. Scaffold layout, as I just mentioned, it's returning text. And so what I'll do here in this step is I'll look at the design. I'll be like, all right, so I can see a top nav, I could see a hero, and again, these are just words. So what if we wanted to give this a different name? It doesn't really matter. In my mind, I'm just thinking conventionally this is a top nav, and this could be a hero. We can call this header 2, whatever. The idea is we're more or less mapping these into individual tickets, and that's all we're doing here in this individual step. So we have map. There's the gym list. There's the gym. Looks like there's just a map here, and then there's the Dex drawer, because when you click the send a professor, it's going to show the drawer. Done. That's it. Then from there, I would be taking all of these and creating individual tickets. So I didn't want to go through all those, but here's the data layer piece right here where we have, all right, so there's the use get guide query. We're going to need that. We're going to probably need get gyms, because we need these gyms. So we're going to need like the guide details, just get some basic stuff like Mike's profile info, the guide title, all that stuff there, and then the individual tickets. And I want to just highlight that I've done all of this in about 30 minutes. And what's nice about breaking these out is if there are actual data requirements, coming from the data team, like where we need to start tracking things in Bloomreach, what I'll end up doing is I take the first stab and be like, well, consider tracking clicks on both catch and send a professor. Because I'm like, yeah, maybe we have to track these. So then I'll actually message Julio and be like, hey, what do you think about this? So instead of us having one massive ticket for data, we break these out. And so I think you get the idea. And then you'll see that they're blocked. Some of these are. Like this one is blocked by the card component, because we need to build a card component before we can create. You don't necessarily have to, but in my mind, it's sort of nice to know, like, I need a card that has the send a professor before the drawer actually shows. And so it's not like you actually have to wait, but the idea is it makes it a little more convenient so you could prioritize stuff. But I can't tell you how fast I get things out doing it this way. And there's something about renaming that it's not like you're starting completely from scratch, but there's definitely a benefit to that, because you get to sort of clean slate it, but also review the previous existing implementation, and it could help. So anyway, what I hope you could take away is, the system doesn't have to be complex. It's just clear. And planning before coding saves so much time. I can't stress this enough. I really can't. Especially if you do the planning before kickoff. You're gonna have better questions. You're not gonna be like, well, what am I doing? You're spending half the time trying to figure out what's being built. Trust me, it saves you a lot of time. But that's it. Again, it is a system that can be improved. I just want you guys to be aware that there are things like this. But yeah, I hope that helps. Let me know if you guys have any questions, concerns.